Good evening, everyone. This is Dr. Mayor Eisenstein, and for the 1 millionth time, as my wife Karen said, we're going to be talking about swine flu and flu in part swine flu. And I know we've already got lots and lots of questions. I'm going to just go through a couple of slides, starting with my late mentor, Dr. Robert Mendelsohn. And this really talks about the whole concept of mass immunization. And this was in 1973, where he said there is no convincing scientific evidence that mass inoculation can be credited with eliminating any childhood disease, we've seen so much in the last couple of weeks. Will there be mandates? Sibilia says no. We know some things for sure. There's going to be mercury in the vaccines. But what we've seen the last couple of days has been even the most remarkable, and that is in town hall meetings around the country with regard to Obamacare. People, the people are striking back, and there's our fearless leader, Yoda. You know, enough is enough. I mean, this is America. This is the United States. This is not Russia. This is not Cuba. This is not China. Anyone who wants health care there can go there. No problem. I mean, it seems that the whole world has gone mad. They've lost their minds over the swine flu. Does Mayor Eisenstein believe there may be a swine flu epidemic? Yes, I think it's possible. But one of the problems is that it's never been shown that the flu vaccine ever has done anything. This is a slide of just flu vaccine over the last 50 years, and you can see, take a look, the blue line is the percentage of people who get the flu vaccine. This is a seasonal flu vaccine. Take a look at this. Up to almost the 2000s now, 65%. Look at the death rate from flu and pneumonia. You know, they quote that wonderful statistic, 36,000 people a year die. Kind of a little bit deceptive because that number may not be exactly right. But the one thing, this is taken from the Center for Disease Control, United States Vital Statistics, and this is not Mayor Eisenstein, a Department of Health and Human Services, our wonderful Secretary Sebelius. Maybe she should take a look at this graph. The other thing that we know that's very serious is that this just came out a couple of days ago, that millions of children are deficient in vitamin D. Hello, we've only known this for years and years, and when they talk about 70% deficient, that's at levels of 30, which wouldn't be protective against anything for all practicality. And then that was followed up, or preceded that, by most Americans are deficient adults. So we're dealing with a country now deficient in vitamin D, who they're talking about inoculating all over the place. We'll talk about this a little bit later, some of my recommendations for vitamin D. And let's just spend 2 minutes and see. How wonderful is this, even though they're having resistance? 20,000 nurses in New York said no to mandatory vaccines. Now, why are nurses mandatory? Because in New York State, they have a rule that nurses can't work in a hospital without getting a flu vaccine. And so, but the nurses said, we're not against the flu vaccine, although I have a feeling that's just kind of a ploy, the swine flu vaccine, but no mandates. No one should have the right to give us a vaccine to be a part of our job. And so let's look through the history of swine flu, of flu vaccine itself, because this is just another one of those vaccines. Flu, but 2009, it didn't work. 2008, it didn't work. And if you want to get, my dear, dear friend, Dr. Sherry Tenpenny, has done incredible work, and we'll put some of the stuff back on. I know I'm just running through it very quickly because I really want to get to the questions and answers. But this is a download that she has on her website, drtenpenny.com, and it'll come up here again. It'll be, and Karen will type it in. And she showed studies. It does not work in babies, does not work with children with asthma. Let's go here to the next page here. Not in adults, not in elderly. And we were talking there, she was talking mainly about the seasonal flu. But why do we have any belief at all that it should be any difference? I don't think so. I can't imagine that. I mean, we have no evidence. The idea that they're going to line up to start with pregnant women and children, then healthcare workers, and then the rest of us, boy, it's reminiscent of all these totalitarian countries. Frightening, frightening, frightening. That's all I could say, you know. And we'll talk tonight about, I want to hear what you have to say. Here are the websites, and Karen will put them down. Pandemicfluonline.com, outstanding. Updates almost daily, and this is headed up by Dr. Tenpenny and a couple of her dear friends. I'm not a good enough scientist to be there. I'm the bully. drtenpenny.com, medicalvoices.org, and homefirst.com, my website. And this is just a study that was done a couple of years ago, which shows that flu vaccine never worked in the elderly. It didn't really have any effect, image without substance. And this is one that shows that it didn't work in children. All right, I think that's really all I wanted to give our opening, because and Karen, let's go right to the questions, because I think that's what tonight is all about.
Okay, as usual, there's always a one of the driving forces behind the questions with the federal government getting so involved in our care is, do you think that the vaccines will become mandatory, or do you think they'll stay voluntary?
Well, the real answer is my opinion is most probably not going to be a whole lot different than anybody else as a guess. I would have said 2 or 3 weeks ago, absolutely yes. Secretary Sebelius said, oh, it's voluntary. But as Dr. Tenpenny has said, and you can go back and listen to some of the archives of when she talked about the government grab for power, being mandatory doesn't necessarily mean they're going to line you up. They're not going to allow your children in school. They won't allow you on airplanes. They won't give you a passport. So there's many, many ways of making something mandatory without actually forcing you to get the vaccine. In Arizona, just a couple of days ago, and you can Google it if you want to find the exact city in Arizona. It wasn't one of the big cities. The school district decided not to give swine flu vaccine in the school because one of Sebelius's ploys or plots or whatever you want to call it was to line up all our children, you know, and give them swine flu vaccine as they entered school. They said no. They said, we're going to send it back to the pediatricians, the family practice doctor, and the government clinics. And I think they made a very wise legal decision. My feeling is the lawyers made it because they didn't want to be held liable if something happened. They didn't say not to get the vaccine. All they said is the schools wouldn't be open to line up the children. I think this is critical when the kids go back to school. And any of our children or grandchildren who are going to be going to school, they have the authority to inject your children without your knowledge. You'll get a little letter that came home. You know, it said your child received the swine flu vaccine.
Okay. Are there any studies to prove that these vaccines work?
We have enormous amount of studies to show they don't work, but not once again. This is a new vaccine. It's just come out. There are no safety studies. And the absurdity, and I'm going to be sending out a newsletter tonight, and I'm going to read you a little bit from it. This is from the World Health Organization, and it was the vaccine director from the World Health Organization, Marie-Paule Kinney, insisted that speeding the vaccine to the market will not compromise its safety. Where did she make that up? Where did she make that up? And then she said, in a statement on its website, the World Health Organization said Thursday, the public needs to be reassured that procedures for approving swine flu vaccine are rigorous and do not compromise safety or quality control. But then they go on to say there is little or no information in how safe flu vaccines with adjuvants are in pregnant women and children, two of the groups most at risk in the pandemic. You know, I can go on and read this BS endlessly. You know, you know, I one of the newsletters I had, they'll all be archived on our website, was BS in, BS out. But a chemistry professor, and I'll remember his name, said, Chazarai in, Chazarai out. And that it's like garbage in, garbage out. I mean, are we all fools? Do they? Well, I think the president took all of us to be fools up until the last couple of days, and all of a sudden, the empire, the people are striking back against the wicked empire. This is very frightening, very, very frightening. Kara?
Okay, here's another question. Do you think that these attenuated virus vaccines actually spread the disease?
Well, first of all, these are going to be live viral vaccines, to the best of my knowledge. And that's a possibility. My wife and I are really blessed. I'm writing an introduction to a book that I just finished on vaccines, and I'm thinking back of my late professor, Dr. Mendelson. See, my wife and I were really privileged. I met him when I was a third-year medical student, and that was in 1960. 67. It was a little bit before. No, it can't be. 71. I remember, I graduated in 72, and in 1971, Dr. Mendelson believed a little bit in vaccines. He believed in oral polio and DPT. And then by 1973, he gave up on everything. He realized that he was wrong. The vaccine program just never worked, and so I've had way before I really became a practicing physician, my wife already knew that he was right, and he was kind of, in a sense, similar to Secretary Sebelius. He was the national medical director of Head Start, the biggest program ever to date that was back in the late 60s, to try to influence the health care of children. And when he came to the University of Illinois, to teach there, I said, oh my God, this is just a privilege to work under him. Most of the students, as I remember, even the ones who took his class and talked to him, said, how could he possibly be right? Is it possible that we've gone to medical school for 4 years and then everything we've learned is wrong?
Okay. This is a really interesting question because it touches on even more than the swine flu issue. What adult diseases are we seeing now as a result of the childhood vaccines that we got during the 50s and 60s?
Well, I can tell you they're trying to link arthritis, diabetes, to diet and exercise, and that's called a bait and switch. Not that I'm against that, not that I don't believe that we should try to keep ourselves thin, but I pack a few extra pounds on myself. It may be care, and this is theoretical. I don't want anyone to say, well, I could say whatever you want, but to be able to say that Dr. Einstein said that the vaccine program has caused all these chronic illnesses. But, but I can tell you one thing that's very, very interesting. If we go back and look at the injectable polio vaccine, that's the Salk vaccine that was given in the 50s, it turned out, and then they stopped giving it shortly afterwards because it was contaminated with live virus, but then they found out, Dr. Michele Carboni found out that it was contaminated with a monkey virus. Back in 1950s, and even when I went to medical school in the 60s, we did not believe that humans could contract diseases from animals directly. And but a whole field grew up of zoonosis. That's transmission of viruses from animals to humans. And it turns out that the original Salk vaccine was contaminated with hundreds of monkey viruses because it was grown on the kidney of the African green monkey. And the one, the SV40, was unique, and the reason it was unique is it was the first virus they isolated. It stands for simian, that's monkey, virus number 40. It caused cancer. Right now today, 50% of all non-Hodgkin's lymphoma is caused by SV40 virus. Frightening. We're even finding SV40 virus in people who never got the vaccine. Young people in their 30s and 40s. They were too young to ever get the original Salk vaccine, which means somehow it's become part of our genetic material. So, Karen, to answer the question, are there adult diseases today that have maybe come about because of the vaccine program given to children and maybe adult? The answer is we know at least one for sure.
Okay. This is a kind of along the lines we talked before about the live virus. Someone says that they've got